Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing fantastic. So, we are continuing our reading of Niccolo Machiavelli. You hear people talk about him all the time, but few have actually read his work. They kind of only know about him because Tupac mentioned him in a song. And people sometimes say, that's so Machiavellian. But you're like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, evil! Then you realize that they're just using a pejorative. They're just kind of repeating a theme that they've heard but haven't really explored. So, digging into this book, you'll now be able to perceive more of what people mean when they say that with knowledge, right? Okay. We are continuing. And because this part is worthy of note and being imitated by others, I do not want to leave it out. When the Duke had taken the Romagna, and finding it to have been governed by impotent rulers, so here we have a Duke who seized upon the Romagna because the leaders were impotent. So another example of weak leaders, like Beijing Biden, who ruin a country and set it up for invaders, who would sooner have plundered their subjects than governed them. So what do you get at here? So those impotent rulers, they rather plunder their own people than actually govern them and make it better, and had given them cause for disunity rather than unity. So what do you get here? Had given them cause for disunity rather than unity, meaning that you should have a leader who wants to govern and keep everything in unison, protect the citizens from being taken advantage of, and not let factions and sectarian violence disrupt the economy and the social flow. So, today, when you have leftists who focus on victimhood hierarchy, you're oppressed because you are this shade. You're oppressed because you're a woman. You're oppressed because you're fat. Oh, the list goes on and on and on about who's a victim. How many points do you get for being a victim? Some people have shared screenshots about some of the, what do you call those? Presentations, I guess you could say. There was another word for it that's slipping my mind. But they have like charts and stuff of like intersectionality, victimhood stuff, and it's just like, can you just deal with your struggles and not create these weird charts? So today, when you have balkanization, these pivot methods that put wedges between society, it causes a lot of problems. Remember how, just to build upon this point, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, basically the founding fathers, in the Federalist Papers, even though Benjamin Franklin didn't contribute to those, but still he was of the same mind, they really wanted unity, hence United States, not Biden, who says, don't let your family come to your house if they don't have a certain procedure. Oh, bring up drama at the Thanksgiving table. It's constant fighting. It's constant problems. And, Kamala Harris bailing out rioters, encouraging them to keep going. It's really unhealthy. So today, we have tech companies controlling the narrative, calling, everyone, this person's a traitor, this person is not a patriot, oh, you're evil, you're anti-science, you're bad because you have multiple children. Oh, it's all these issues that are causing frictions within the society. So what are you getting at here? Just in these few sentences, you don't want an impotent ruler. For example, look at Biden. He fell up the stairs more than once. He stumbles. He is very bitter, frail, says things that don't make sense. We know the media covers for him. They let you slander Trump, make the most brutal memes. But if you make a meme of Biden that they detect too many times, they can ban you. So you see the censorship heavily on one side. So they're covering his failures, even though he's high inflation. He pulled out of Afghanistan horribly. He's not the man to lead a military-based empire, and his cackling, cold VP who wouldn't visit the children at the border, who lied about it, went to the other part of the border that had nothing to do with the facilities because she didn't want to look bad in the PR. She's not really potent. She's not effective. But her gender is something that people will use to protect her, right? When she's really not a leader, right? So you want a strong leader, law and order. You want the government to protect you from being abused from domestic and foreign forces, right? And you want unity. You don't want disunity. You don't want factions. You don't want constant irritation and pressure in the society, right? All of this is disruptive. So here you can see a cool point on the insights of what Machiavelli is getting at, right? Because that's how he is saying that the Romagna was taken. So, that the entire province was full of robberies, fighting, and every other kind of insolence. So here, what do you get at? This is important too. Entire province, robberies, fighting, and insolence. So it's just vice. It's like what the leftists have done to California. In the cities, you go out to the beautiful rural areas, you're like, oh, thank goodness. Oh, this hasn't been ruined. You know, you're thankful you can still see the ocean. Oh my gosh. But you go into Oakland, you go into Richmond, you go to certain parts of San Jose, San Bernardino, look up the crime statistics by county, go in the Watts Hood in LA, you go to East LA, you got Hollywood, the Boulevard, it's just sad, tons of problems. In San Francisco, you got lots of homelessness, lots of drug use, but the locals kind of say, oh, it's always been that way, it's fine, and then they go to their Whole Foods and totally ignore the issue. So you don't want a bunch of robberies. Look up the statistics now about how California made it easier and safer for criminals to steal out of Walgreens and CVS. Check how many Walgreens and CVS had to close because of the constant theft. Because they wanted to defund police with their woke policies that came out of the strange, bizarre university echo chambers, the towers ruling the peasants, and how it caused real problem for business owners, right? Making the communities less safe, taking away little by little through incremental steps people's right to bear arms, right? By using fear to make the population give up their rights, while idolizing musicians who encourage the reckless behavior, and then turning around and blaming religious people for not wanting that kind of image projected to the fatherless youth. So the cycle continues, right? They really are backwards. So this robbery, like Pacific Union trains, I shared it with you in Los Angeles, they have recorded so much train robberies now. There's footage, and it's just like, what is going on? So you see impotent leaders, Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, these failed activists, leftist leaders, like in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York City. You see how they have crashed and burned their own lands, and they don't seem powerful. They're not respected. They're not loved. They're corrupt and self-serving, right? Fighting is at gas stations, gang violence. It's literally insane, but people have their little pockets, so they're like, it's fine, as long as my pocket's okay. But notice how he said the entire province. You have Contra Costa County, lots of problems going on. People make excuses there. You'll talk to them. Other people are like, I hate it. I wish it would change. Others are like, well, it makes us look kind of cool. It puts us on the map. And you're the map meaning like the violence map. They take pride in the violence. You meet real people like this. And you're like, okay, you want to be on the crime map, but then you complain about how no one can set up a business there. There's no jobs, which perpetuates poverty and lack of opportunity, and then you blame everyone else, but your behavior is preventing businesses from coming in, right? So failed leadership, impotent rulers, allowing robberies, fighting, and insolence, drug use, homelessness, to occur in a province, and then having corrupt officials, it's just setting you up for another stronger leader coming in. This is why when you have the pacifist kind of hippy-dippy leadership, you see it doesn't work. Because an impotent leader is a pacifist. They're not strong. They're not heavy-fisted. I'm not saying you have to go full Stalin. But you need someone who's like, this ain't gonna happen. Maintain law and order so we can have an economy. Because through the economy, the families will be fed. Trade will occur. We gotta keep people busy. Keep them doing something. High rates of unemployment, more crime, more promiscuity, more unaccountable children being in the street, more depressed individuals buying drugs and joining gangs and selling drugs, and then the cycle just keeps going, right? A strong ruler rooting out vice and malice, a watchful eye, a strong, very potent individual, not a femme type of guy who's, deciding what color to make the pillows or how he wants the view to look on the patio where he sits, and he has to make sure his silk robes are nice and his nails are painted. No. But also not somebody who's out golfing all day and, not caring, right? Or on his yacht. So, again, there's so many nuances here, but what Machiavelli is getting at, just within these few sentences, is how can a ruler prevent themselves from being deposed, usurped, and going off into shame as invaders arrive and take over, and the population suffers under him and might do better in the long run with the new regime, but the transition is not going to be as rosy. So, again, you don't want insolence, fighting, robberies, and stuff. You don't want to be soft on crime. Again, there's a reason why you should read the classics. Because the new woke tards of the postmodern movement, these people who really censor you in the classroom and they're shoving their stuff into you and they call everyone a white supremacist and not to read the classics, you almost have to wonder, it's like this cultural Marxist revolution of tear down the past and swallow down the new agenda. It's really quite strange. And then you wonder, this is something that we should read. So if they tell you not to read something, you should probably read it. Just to have some balance. Whether you agree with them or not, you need to have balance in order to weigh the scales of reason, right? So another brilliant point by Machiavelli. He decided that if he wanted to pacify it and make it obedient to its sovereign power, another great point. Look at that. To pacify it. Obedient to the sovereign power. See that? Pacify. So get rid of the disunity. Get rid of the robberies, the fighting. Pacify it. Make it obey the command. It would be necessary to give them a good government. So here, look at that. You see? He's saying give them a good government. So remember when people say ooh, Machiavelli, right? And you're like, well, actually, I read his work or listened to, an audio reading of it, and he wasn't 100% bad as you're trying to project him simply because he had chess move analytical skills, right? For this purpose, he put Messer Ramiro de Orco in charge, a cruel and decisive man, to whom he gave the fullest authority. Now here, the pendulum has swung. The pendulum has swung. You see that? They had the Duke who took Romagna. He employed Ramiro, and cruel and decisive. So the cruel is not just about torturing or something like that, but it's also about hey, decisions must be made. Decisions must be made, and we gotta do what we gotta do. It's not always entirely negative, even though I know it feels like that. But what one calls cruel, another person calls necessary. What another person calls necessary is a bit transgressive. And what other calls necessary is just the right amount. So understand that nuance for me, please. And decisive. See, inaction means you are impotent. Means you're so wishy-washy. You're not confident. You're confused. You're beta. You don't really make a decision and stick to it. This is something that I've learned and others as well. Doesn't mean you don't change your mind. But if the action plan is this plan, you carry it out. If you fail, regroup, try again, learn from your mistakes, get a second opinion before launching, right? But you say, okay, this is the plan, let's roll it out. But if you're like, okay, the plan is this, oh, who's this? Well, I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe we just don't do it. It's like, you don't want a person like that as your ruler. You feel me? So it's very interesting that he was given full authority to carry out his reforms that would make the people obey their sovereign power, and that so they could have a sort of pacifistic element, right? It's quite interesting. In a short time, this man returned to the country to peace and unity, enhancing greatly his own reputation as he did so. After that, the Duke judged that such excessive authority was not necessary, because he feared, it might become odious. So here you see the balance. Okay, you fulfilled the mission, you did the goal, order has been reinstated. Now let's draw down some of that authority that you have been given. Let's see how it plays out. Because he doesn't want the people to resent it. Too much force for too long, people are going to start to really get angry, just like today. Too much medical fascism is going to have the boomerang effect. The pendulum is going to be like, okay, man, now you're too much in my life. You feel me? Too much oppression, just constantly pushing down on you, constantly pushing down on you. Eventually, your spine's going to be like, I need to stand up now, and I don't like what you're doing, right? He set up a civil court in the middle of the province with a most excellent presiding judge, in which each city had its own advocate. So here, you can see how the judiciary, is really coming about as an essential component to order. So each city, hey, you got your point, you got your point. And instead of having it only this one supreme, that would make people feel smaller. I don't get heard. There's no help for me. This is oppressive. But if you have a localized judiciary, which we kind of have today, right? This helps people get a more satisfied feeling of something is getting done. So they have hope, and their anger has been calmed down a little bit, and they're less angry. They're not feeling as if justice hasn't been done. Now, bureaucracy is still a problem, right? The paper pushers might not push the papers, but there's an element of where can I go? Who do I need to talk to? Let's get her done, right? It is quite interesting. So, just in this small spot, we have learned about Ramiro de Orco, the Romagna, and how you should prevent disunity. And leaders who are promoting disunity, look at them in a very, well, it's different to complain. Like, we need this, and, we need to fix infrastructure, and we have to do this. It's like, cool, yeah, problem solving. Pointing out problems and solving them. But if there's too much finger pointing and no introspection, this is when we're going to have a little bit of an issue. If you're not holding both sides accountable to the same standard, but overlooking the faults of one side while amplifying that of the other, now you're creating disunity and friction, right? It's really quite interesting. Very interesting. So hopefully you totally nerded out. And remember, an impotent ruler allows mass crime. A weak ruler allows mass crime. Oh, the poor criminals. Oh. At the expense of the people, because the people get plundered by the robbers, right? Innocent, good, hardworking people get plundered by crime. Don't have sympathy for the criminals. They just want bread, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said. No, you're making a mess. You're not being good. You're robbing mothers with their stroller, snatching their gold change. Enough is enough. Lock them up. Fix the prison system. That's a separate issue. But no one is obligated to let you continue doing crime. Right? A strong leader does not allow that. Very cool. You see the echoes with the Founding Fathers. So it's so important to read the classics because you perceive how their consciousness is in that time period, but also how you kind of can connect with what they're saying and not just hear the buzzwords of people who've never read the works but speak on it. And then you'll be able to identify if someone's actually read the works or if they haven't. And if they talk about what they have not read, you should totally be like, hey man, you can't talk about what you don't know. If you haven't read anything, I'm not saying you have to be an expert. You don't have to have a PhD in Machiavelli, right? But are you at least basically familiar? You know, have you read something? But if you've only heard something in a Tupac song, well, that's not exactly enough to give you an understanding of the dude's philosophy. You feel me? So, very nerdy, and I hope you learned something. I know I did.